There's a name trending in Raider circles right now that should make every fan's stomach drop a little, and I need to talk you through it before the panic does your thinking for you. Maxx Crosby, trade. Those two things are sitting in the same sentence again, and I'll be honest with you, my first reaction wasn't to fire up a script and start speculating. It was exhaustion, because we already did this dance once this year, and I'm not sure the fan base has fully recovered from round one. Let me set the scene properly, because the emotional residue here matters just as much as the actual report. Back earlier this year, this exact storyline consumed every single conversation about this franchise for weeks on end. The Baltimore talks, the uncertainty, the genuine gut-level question of whether our best defensive player was going to be wearing a different jersey by the time camp rolled around. We lived through that entire cycle. The deal collapsed, and slowly, painfully, the noise died down enough for us to talk about actual football again. And then, almost like clockwork, the second things got quiet, the rumor mill cranked back up like it had never actually stopped running in the background. So no, I wasn't excited when this hit my feed. I was tired. Are we really doing this again? Right as camp approaches? Right when this roster is supposed to be coming together instead of bracing for another gut punch? So, let's actually get into what's being reported, because the specifics here matter more than the headline. The word going around is that two genuine contenders, real heavyweight organizations, are circling Crosby with serious, tangible interest. Not the generic, every team in the league would love to have him filler that gets attached to basically every elite player at some point in their career. We're talking specifically about the Eagles and the 49ers, two front offices that do not burn energy chasing names unless they actually believe that player changes the math for them immediately. And the person who broke this isn't some anonymous account fishing for retweets. This is someone with real receipts in this exact space, someone whose reporting has held up under scrutiny before. He didn't hedge. He didn't use soft, deniable language like worth monitoring. When he described San Francisco's posture here, the words he chose left almost no room for ambiguity. This reads like genuine hunger, the kind of pursuit you only see when a front office has convinced itself one specific player is the difference between good and great. Philadelphia is positioned a step further back, watching, calculating, ready to jump if the price ever drifts into something realistic, though nobody inside that building is treating this as urgent or close. Now here's where I need you to actually slow down with me, because this next detail completely changes the emotional temperature of the story, and it's the exact piece that gets steamrolled the second people start chasing dramatic headlines. The same source who put this out there was careful to clarify something important. This is not Crosby walking into a meeting and demanding his way out. This isn't some locker room revolt. This isn't ownership throwing up their hands and deciding they're finished with him. None of that is happening. What's actually going on is a front office doing exactly what smart front offices always do, leaving the door open, staying flexible, acknowledging that under some theoretical combination of circumstances, with the right number attached, a conversation could exist. That is an entirely different universe from a player begging out or a team desperate to be rid of him. The gap between those two realities is enormous, and yet online, they get treated like they're the same story. I'll hold myself accountable here too, because I think it actually matters for trust. When this same rumor first caught fire months ago, I told you directly right here that I didn't believe Crosby was genuinely on the block, that the noise was running well ahead of the actual substance underneath it. And I was right. The deal never happened. Nothing materialized. So I'm not walking into this fresh wave, wide-eyed or naively trusting the front office out of habit. I've already watched this exact movie play out once, beginning to end, and I have a decent sense of how these things tend to resolve. But I also won't sit here and tell you it's flatly impossible, because impossible is a reckless word to use in this league. My honest, sober read is this. Somewhere down the line, someone could theoretically build an offer extraordinary enough to actually pry him loose. That offer simply doesn't exist right now, in this window, under these specific conditions. Let's actually dig into the logic, because I want this to hold up under real scrutiny and not just sound comforting. Look at the calendar. Camp is bearing down fast. Pads are about to start cracking. Every position battle that's been quietly simmering all offseason is about to get decided through actual contact instead of theory and projection. Chemistry is being forged right now, in real time, in walkthroughs and meeting rooms, and the kind of hallway conversations nobody outside the building ever sees or hears about. This, without question, is the single worst possible window for any front office to be entertaining a move this seismic involving the most disruptive piece of your entire defensive identity. You don't blow up the foundation of your defense days before camp opens. That's not asset management. That's self-sabotage. And any executive who's earned the title understands that distinction in their bones without needing it explained to them. And here's something I think gets criminally under-discussed in these conversations: pure organizational fatigue. This exact front office already lived through a full emotional roller coaster with this exact player earlier this year. Real conversations happened with Baltimore. Real possibilities sat on the table. And in the end, none of it came together. So you're asking me to believe that after dragging the locker room and the entire fan base through that ringer once already, they're just going to casually reopen that same wound on a tighter clock with higher stakes right as the season closes in? That doesn't track for me at all. Front offices generally don't enjoy relitigating decisions they already wrestled through, especially not under worse conditions the second time around. There's another layer that keeps getting lost in the online trade value chatter. Crosby's market value isn't sitting where it was when the Baltimore conversation was genuinely hot. Back then, there was a cleaner runway, more time to integrate into a new scheme, more leverage spread across the board. Now, a trade this close to the season means walking cold into a brand new defensive system with almost no runway before kickoff. That compresses his value immediately, and any team genuinely interested would factor that disruption straight into whatever they're willing to offer. So from a pure business standpoint, moving him now makes less sense than it did months ago, not more. But honestly, none of that asset management talk is actually the biggest factor for me. The biggest factor is Crosby the person. He said it himself, repeatedly, on record. He has zero interest in playing anywhere else. He's talked about real commitment to this organization, this city, finishing exactly what he started here. And I don't think people fully appreciate what he went through emotionally during the Baltimore saga, building your entire identity around one franchise, then sitting with the genuine possibility of getting uprooted from it while still being expected to lead and perform at an elite level every single day regardless. That takes something out of a person. There's a real human cost to being treated as trade bait more than once, and everything about his public stance reads like a guy who already paid that toll and has absolutely no appetite for paying it a second time. Now, could things shift as the actual season unfolds? Sure. I don't own a crystal ball, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. If this team comes out of the gate stumbling, if losses start piling up and frustration starts creeping into that locker room, mindsets can shift fast in this league. Loyalty gets tested the second losing turns from an exception into a habit. I won't stand here and guarantee you with total certainty that this exact conversation never resurfaces later this season. But right now, in this specific window, with camp on the horizon and a player who's been publicly and consistently clear about staying, I just don't see where the urgency is supposed to come from for anyone involved to manufacture this into something real. And let's be fair to the suitors here too, because their interest isn't irrational or random. Of course, elite organizations are circling a player with Crosby's resume. Any franchise serious about competing immediately would want that kind of disruptive force anchoring their front seven. San Francisco's motivation actually connects pretty cleanly across the conference. Their most direct rival just added an elite pass rusher of their own. And if the Niners want to stay at the top of that conversation, Crosby's name naturally lands near the top of any list of answers. Philadelphia, meanwhile, has built its entire recent identity around aggressive win-now asset management. They've never blinked at spending premium draft capital when they believe a player pushes them over the top. Neither team's interest should shock anyone who's actually watched how these two organizations operate over the last several years. But here's what I keep coming back to. Interest is not inevitability. Teams express interest in star-caliber players constantly. That's just the rhythm of this league, week to week, year to year. The real question was never whether other franchises wanted him. Of course they want him. The actual question has always been whether the Raiders organization and Crosby himself are genuinely willing to make something happen. And right now, every single signal coming out of that building points toward a clear no. Not yet, and not under these conditions. So where does that leave us as fans watching this play out from the outside? I think the most rational position right now is patience. Trust that this front office understands exactly what stability means walking into a pivotal season. Trust that Crosby's words about commitment carry actual weight instead of being hollow PR talking points. And if, down the line, a genuinely franchise-altering offer ever lands on the table, that's a conversation for another day, not something to lose sleep over the week before camp opens. I want this defense built around his presence on the field, not distracted by another full round of speculation about his future off it. Now let's shift completely, because there's something else worth sitting with that's a lot lighter, and honestly kind of refreshing after all that trade tension. The organization recently released behind-the-scenes footage giving fans a real, unfiltered look at different storylines happening around the building, and a couple of moments involving rookie quarterback Fernando Mendoza genuinely stuck with me. I want to walk through both of them carefully, because I think they reveal something real about who this young player actually is underneath the scouting report. The first moment takes us back to the pre-draft circuit at the Combine. Mendoza was deep in the grind of back-to-back meetings with personnel from different teams when he suddenly found himself face-to-face with someone who, at the quarterback position for this exact franchise, is basically royalty. The exchange was brief, but you could feel the weight sitting underneath it. It didn't read like a staged photo opportunity. It read like something genuine. A legend at that position taking a few seconds out of his day to quietly tell a young player to stay true to who he already is. For a kid who's probably idolized players at that position his entire life, having someone like that personally check in on him, even briefly, has to land differently than almost anything else that happened during that entire draft process. That's a signal. It tells you what kind of structure this rookie is actually stepping into. Not just a locker room, but a network with elite mentorship sitting one phone call away. And honestly, that's the part of this Mendoza chapter that excites me the most. It's not purely about arm talent or measurables, even though obviously those still matter plenty. It's about the entire ecosystem surrounding him. Established offensive coaching, front office continuity, and now this quiet layer of organic mentorship sitting in the background of everything else. Stack all of that together, and you get a runway most young quarterbacks never come close to receiving. That foundation alone makes me considerably more optimistic about his developmental path than I'd be watching him walk into a chaotic, unstable situation somewhere else. The second moment actually hit me harder, and it might be the more revealing of the two. It was a candid sit-down between Mendoza and the general manager, and the question thrown at him was direct, essentially asking him to address the distance between the polished, media-trained version of himself the public watched during the draft process, and the more authentic person actually sitting across that table. Mendoza didn't get defensive. He explained that throughout the season, away from the social media machine shaping outside perception, the surrounding narrative ended up painting a slightly distorted picture of who he genuinely is. He brought up one specific moment, an emotional in-game reaction that got dissected and stretched into a whole storyline about him being almost robotically composed, disciplined to the point where it started reading as manufactured instead of authentic. He talked about how communication has always mattered deeply to him, how he's deliberately worked on his speaking ability for years, studied leadership, read constantly, all in an effort to connect more naturally with teammates and coaches around him. But somehow that polish got misread from a distance as something hollow, and he made it clear, without a trace of bitterness in his voice, that the people who actually know him, teammates, coaches, the people inside that building every single day, would tell you a completely different story than the one painted from far away by people who've never sat across from him. Watching him lay that out, I found myself nodding along because this is a pattern we've watched repeat itself across nearly every sport with young athletes. The media builds a narrative off one tiny sliver of footage stripped of any real context, and that narrative calcifies into public perception regardless of whether it actually reflects reality. We've watched this exact pattern before. One prominent rookie got painted as disinterested in the game off a single offhand comment, only to go on and win major individual hardware that obliterated that entire framing. Another faced real skepticism about his passion simply because his preparation style looked unconventional on the surface, and he silenced every bit of it the moment production followed him onto the field. Mendoza's version of this wasn't built around laziness or disinterest. It was built around being almost too composed, too polished. And ironically, the second you actually watch him in genuinely unscripted moments, you catch real flashes of personality and edge that directly contradict that squeaky clean image people quietly constructed around him without ever truly knowing him. That contrast, to me, is genuinely encouraging rather than something to worry about. It tells you there's an actual person underneath all of it, not some hollow manufactured brand built for cameras. It tells you he's self-aware enough to recognize how he's being perceived from a distance, and confident enough to address it head-on instead of dodging behind a rehearsed, safe non-answer. For a rookie quarterback stepping into a new locker room, a new city, and an entirely new level of scrutiny, that kind of self-awareness matters more than people tend to give it credit for. So when I zoom out and think about what this actually means going forward, I keep arriving at the same conclusion every time. As long as Mendoza keeps showing up, keeps building genuine relationships throughout that building, and keeps producing when it actually counts on the field, none of this perception noise is going to matter in the long run. Narratives fade fast in this league. What sticks is production, leadership, and how a guy responds once real adversity shows up and the spotlight gets uncomfortable. Based on everything I've seen so far, I feel genuinely optimistic about where this particular chapter is heading. Put it all together and you've got two completely different storylines running side by side right now. On one hand, trade speculation circling your best defensive player, rooted in outside interest that for now doesn't appear destined to turn into anything concrete. On the other, a young quarterback quietly building real relationships, showing genuine self-awareness, and stepping into a support system that gives him every realistic shot at early success. Both stories matter heading into this season, but this franchise's actual trajectory is going to be shaped far more by how that second storyline unfolds than by another round of speculative trade noise that's already burned this fan base once this offseason.